This episode is sponsored by Roundel. Start the new year with media plans built with Roundel, Target's retail media business. Roundel connects brands with 165 million plus Target guests through data-driven strategies and tailored partnerships that deliver measurable results. Whether you're elevating your brand, expanding reach, or driving growth, Roundel helps your message show up in moments of discovery and joy. Because at Roundel, joy is good for business. Learn more at roundel.com.
Hi, I'm Brandon Dorr, Creativity and Media Innovation Reporter at Ad Age. Welcome to another edition of the Marketer's Brief podcast, our weekly discussion of news and trends that have the industry buzzing. This week, we're joined by Vineet Mehra, Chief Growth and Marketing Officer at Chime. He joins the podcast to talk about how his role has changed since formally adding Growth Officer to his title in December. He gives his take on how the CMO role is changing overall and what marketers need to do to stay relevant over the next few years, including learning the ins and outs of AI and in-housing a lot more work from agencies. We also talk about how marketers can address the financial anxiety consumers are currently feeling. Here's that conversation now. Vineet Mehra, welcome to the Marketer's Brief podcast.
Thanks, Brandon. Great to be here. Great to see you again, and Happy New Year.
Yeah, it's very good to have you. Happy New Year to you as well. I know last year was a big year for Chime and you overall. Chime went public last year, and then you in December took on a slightly different role, Chief Growth and Marketing Officer. Can you talk, I guess, a little bit about actually how your role differs in this new regard when you added growth to it in December?
This is an interesting constant debate in our industry. I mean, look, if you ask me, the job of the CMO is allocating capital to drive growth, right? That is what it is. And there's a lot of things you do that. You build a great brand, you drive efficient marketing strategies, you hire the talent. So not growth is still a CMO remit. I think the reason they added growth, at least, in different industries are different. In tech, this indication of adding growth to your remit means that you've got a lot of ownership over the product and engineering resources that help you drive the top line growth and customer acquisition of your business, right? So what it does is it sort of officializes this notion that it's not just marketers that are reporting into you, it's product engineering. And if you know anything about Silicon Valley, that's a pretty hard line usually between marketing and then sort of the tech talent in a company. And sort of what this just recognizes is this notion that you're driving growth through marketing, product, and engineering. And that's essentially what the difference is.
Yeah, I think it's a nice little teaser for a conversation we're going to have in a little bit later on when we talk more broadly about the CML role and how it is evolving. Before we get into that conversation, I do want to talk a little bit about some of the most recent work that Chime has released. You guys released your first holiday campaign with Jason Momoa late last year. Just for a second, can we talk a little bit about that campaign and why you guys decided to create a holiday campaign for the first time last year?
Yeah, well, look, I think any great brand in telling its story finds those highest contextual moments where the context of the moment and the brand story can really come together. And, we've launched part two of Jason Momoa now in January, and I'll kind of talk about both pieces here. One of the insights we had about holidays was, for everyday Americans, those earning up to 100K, which is 200 million people across America, if you look at how much retail spending happens during that time, a lot of people are kind of getting in over their skis a little bit financially to like buy gifts for their families, go on that trip. Life gets expensive during that moment. It creates a lot of financial stress. And so we thought contextually, what a perfect moment to tell this Chime story about how we enable financial progress with all of our unique innovations in banking and no fee products. And we've had an amazing year. We opened more checking accounts than anyone in America last year. I mean, we're a big player now. We had our IPO, and we thought this holiday is a great moment to just tell the story and convince people to stop banking the old way, right? Which is a big part of that spot.
Yeah, and real quick, who were the agencies that worked on that?
Our in-house team does a lot of kind of the core concepting, and then we worked a lot with Mojo, who did an amazing job on helping us bring this idea to life.
Yeah, shout out to Mojo Supermarket for some of that work. I think this is a really good, actually, a transition to another topic that I wanted to talk to you a little bit about. I'm really curious how well you think the marketing industry more broadly, even outside of the category that you're in, is kind of meeting this affordability moment. And potentially, I guess if you have thoughts about how brands, even outside of your category, can better meet this kind of financial state, right, that a lot of this country's in.
Yeah, look, in moments like this is not the first sort of moment like this a lot of us have been through. I've been doing this for 25, 30 years, and we've all been through ups and downs in the economy. In moments like this, what the consumer really wants is value, right? And value, I'm going to give you the marketing textbook definition, is the bundle of benefits divided by price, right? That's the mathematical definition of value. And so I do think brands have to meet this moment and products have to meet this moment. For instance, it's not that consumers aren't willing to spend money. They're only going to be willing to spend money on this moment on things that might last them 20 years, 30 years, right? They're buying things that last, buying things that actually generate more value than they take, That's sort of what this moment is about. And I think you start to see brands adjusting, right? You're starting to see a lot more stories around buy less, not more, right? Which is another way of saying sort of buy this, you don't have to buy another thing for 20 years. So spend the money once and you're good, right? It's these stories of value that are going to win today. And the second thing I think that's going to win and in this playbook, in this moment, is authenticity and actually having actual customers of these brands and products tell their stories so people don't feel like being they're sold to or a bill of goods, right? In these kinds of moments, consumers are much more discerning. They're doing much more research. They want to make sure that if they're spending money or making a decision, that there's a lot of validity and credibility behind the products and brands they're using. And so even at Chime, like more than half of our media weight are what we call member testimonials. Those are not actors, they're actual members that we cast, and they tell the story of why they use Chime, right? So yes, we've got a Jason Momoa spot and NBA contextual creative that we put out in the world, but we also have this idea of members telling their story without scripts and just putting it on air, and that's been one of our biggest things. So you think about this value plus sort of credibility playbook in this sort of an environment. That's sort of what we've been playing on, and it's working really well for us. And I think in general, that's sort of a bit of a playbook brands need in this moment.
Coming up next on the Marketer's Brief, Vineet talks about the evolving role of CMOs and how marketers can prepare to meet new expectations.
This episode is sponsored by Roundel. Start the new year with media plans built with Roundel, Target's retail media business. Roundel connects brands with 165 million plus target guests through data-driven strategies and tailored partnerships that deliver measurable results. Whether you're elevating your brand, expanding reach, or driving growth, Roundel helps your message show up in moments of discovery and joy. Because at Roundel, joy is good for business. Learn more at roundel.com.
I want to pick back up on a conversation we were starting to have earlier in this chat, talking about the evolvement of the CMO role, right? We just got out of predictions season. I guess to a certain extent, we're almost still in prediction season and still seeing some of those come out. But some of the predictions that we got towards the end of last year is that the CMO role is actually disappearing, the role as we know it, right? And by 2030, it's going to look like something very different. We're seeing CMOs become more focused and more responsible for the business overall, right? Not just marketing itself. As someone who has just taken on, right, a bigger role fairly recently within a company, what do you, I guess, make of this trend and this prediction? And what do you, I guess, make of the importance of the CMO in 2026?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. In my case, this is the third time I've taken on a title or a role called Chief Growth Officer, right? And it's so funny, like company to company, it's just really different, right? But at the core of it, the CMO's job is, as I said earlier, allocating capital for growth. If you're a CMO that cannot connect your executional decisions and choices with the growth of your company. And by growth, I mean revenue, EBITDA, earnings per share, right? Like the financial metrics of a company. I do think those roles are in danger of, and those that talent and those people are going to be in danger of becoming irrelevant in the next 4 or 5 years. And this all comes down to what I believe the moment we're in. I really believe that today, right now, we are living in what I think is the golden age of marketing. It's not the Mad Men era, right? Like a lot of people will tell you that's the golden age of marketing. I think there's a lot of gold there, but there's a lot of things that weren't working there as well. And I think today we're living in this new golden age of marketing, right? I always talk about marketing being math and magic. So let's like sort of break it down, right? On the magic side, if you literally think of an idea, you can create it, right? I mean, it is truly unbelievable what's happening. We no longer have a creative agency on retainer. We're doing some really big work with some very big athletes that's going to be coming out in April and May. I'm sure we can talk about it closer to the date, but 100% in-house, no agencies. We're making the deals with the talent. We're hiring the director. We're producing it, right? And we went from sort of concept to shoot in 6 weeks with two of the biggest name athletes you've ever heard of. So it's an unbelievable moment right now where in-house teams can literally go from idea to launch in weeks. You can optimize marketing funnels and e-commerce funnels without A/B testing. You can now do it in real time through things like AI-based reinforcement learning models. Agents are taking over things like writing emails for you and website updates and all of these things. Now, taste and some of those elements of like, what makes marketing special, like that taste factor, is still going to be a human in the loop. Don't get me wrong. But this idea of going from idea to execution on the magic side of marketing is unbelievable. And then on the math side, the ability to attribute what you're doing to outcomes has never been stronger, right? Whether that's in the core kind of walled garden platforms, more and more there's innovation happening where companies are letting you optimize more and more across platforms in real-time ways. We use a tool that you can literally ask it. It's almost like a GPT interface for direct response or performance marketing creative optimizations that you're making, right? It's just an unbelievable time to be a marketer, but marketers that are not on with this shift, right? That are not really connected to what's happening. I think there's going to be a lot of challenges. And, we can get into what I think 2030 CMO needs to master if that's helpful for you. But like, we are living in the golden age of marketing, and it's an amazing time to be doing what we're doing.
Yeah, I was going to ask you actually, what is it that marketers need to start doing, even start doing this year, right, to catch up to the modern needs, expectations of a CMO today?
Yeah, well, look, the modern CMO, or like, let's say the 2030 CMO, there's going to be 4 or 5 things that I think get really important. The first one is I think we have to think about our roles more and more like almost like AI conductors. So my team today, yes, I have a very talented group of humans, doing great marketing, but I also have dozens of agents now that are literally doing work, right? Like literally writing emails, sending them out, right? Doing the work. And we're sending billions a month, right? So it is this really interesting job now of how do you connect human with agent? What's an org structure in that context? If you have freed up resources that don't need to be like sitting there crafting emails and like mini adjustments on your websites all day, what do you use those resources for? So this idea of sort of AI conductor, I think it's going to be an amazing moment. I read some stats. I think Gartner predicted that by 2027, 30% of all marketing messages, the actual creative itself will be AI generated. And on the media side, on the distribution side, I mean, it's already there, right? Like platforms like Google and Meta, if they have enough of your ad units and you give them an outcome you want to optimize to, it goes in and they're distributing it across all their various platforms, auto modulating the ad units, right? I mean, that's agentic in itself, right? So it's this notion of being an AI conductor when you have dozens of agents doing work along with people is sort of a skill that people need to build. The second one is sort of this idea of being a capital allocator and a financial strategist. That same Gartner study said something like 83% of boards already expect CMOs to tie spend directly to revenue and earnings per share. That's just a board expectation. And as someone who sits on a board, I'm a CMO on a couple of public boards, and I actually sit on the audit committee of some boards, right? Like it's a really important skill to be able to talk the language of the CFO, the language of your board, be able to vibe with an audit committee if you need to, and really get into that space. So I think that every dollar by 2030 is going to be scrutinized like you would scrutinize like your ETF, like it's going to be scrutinized at that level. And future CMOs, if they're not talking LTV to CAC, if they're not talking about sort of payback periods on their spend, I think they're going to be in a lot of trouble. The CMO who can't read a P&L won't survive, right? I think the third thing is the community architect, I call it. And the reason I'm saying that, I talked about this a little, trust in ads is collapsing. If you look at any consumer study, something less than 50% of people trust ads, and more than 90% of people trust their peers. So what does that mean, right? Paid reach will start to fade more and more in the background. It's not that it's not important, but it'll have a different job to do. It won't be the sole way, you build trust and credibility for your brand. And the strongest CMOs will realize that they have to create these ecosystems of belonging, right? Customer communities, tokenized loyalty, products that are co-created, it's this community architect vision that I think is going to be today it happens, but I think it's going to be the front end, the tip of the spear in how you build your brand more and more and more. The fourth thing that I talk about a lot is being the cultural decoder. Now, some of this happens already, but what's really interesting is that like TikTok trends rise in days now, not quarters. Like literally, there'll be a 2-day trend or there'll be like a 4-day trend. It'll just pop out of nowhere. And so culture is fracturing way faster than organizations can react. And so CMOs now need to be trend spotters, but not in a macro sort of general cultural anthropological way, right? Like they need to be daily trend spotters, right? You need to find patterns, you need to find signals before they become big. And there's tons of tools and AI tools now. They're actually predicting what the next trend is going to be, right? Based on early signals and early comments and social feeds. It's a fascinating thing. And you have to be able to get these weak signals and translate them into competitive advantage, or you'll miss the 3-day window, right, for your brand to think, right? And think about the fast twitch muscle you need to do that. And then the last one I was saying is be a talent multiplier. Marketing orgs are shrinking fast. There was a Deloitte study that's saying that over the next 5 years, 100% of CMOs think they're going to cut their orgs by almost 30%, right? And so, how do you get 10x more done? Because that's going to be the expectation with all the things I just talked about, with 20, 30% less people. I mean, I think entire disciplines may vanish. Things like media buying, campaign calendaring, creative iteration teams. Like they just honestly may not be around anymore, And I don't mean to be an alarmist. I'm just trying to be honest and real. And so I think big teams will be a liability. I think we are years away from the first like 5-person billion-dollar company, It is not far away. So winning CMOs will be able to scale impact through AI augmented strike teams, right? Like small strike teams. And I think that talent multiplier idea is going to be a big thing. I will tell you the one thing that will never change, though, is this idea of like having a clear, enduring brand story. Because when all of us are using the same AI, the only thing that's going to make a difference is brands that have an actual story that people want to listen to and is relevant, right? That's not going to go away. You still got to train the AI brains here, right? But I think there's elements of all five of these things happening today. But if I look into 2030, these five things are going to be the job. And it's going to be, I think, very evolved from where it is today.
Yeah, I think there's so much more we could delve into. We could probably literally spend the entire day talking more about these topics. I do want to spend a couple more minutes chatting about agentic AI, just because it kind of weaved its way throughout your answer at a few different points throughout it. I think one of the more recent conversations, especially coming out of CES, I think is the agentic media buying, right? Is that something that you would be interested in, right? Would you allow an AI agent to make that final step of purchasing inventory?
Well, Brandon, the truth is, it's kind of that already on the giant platforms like Google and Meta, right? Like, if you think about it, right, Google owns multiple properties, right? From display networks to search to YouTube, Waymo, like on and on. They already have products like PMax and other products where essentially what you're doing is you're giving it a budget and an outcome. You've trained it already with all the creative you've ever run, the words you've ever used, all the videos, all the stuff. And it is literally self-modulating assets native to each of its different platforms and focused on giving you outcomes by auto mixing where it's going to spend money at the top of the funnel to retargeting campaigns to direct response campaigns. And it's already doing that. So the truth is, I'd say Google, Meta, TikTok, these are already algorithmic businesses. They're already serving up these ads. And of course, things like brand safety and some of these things matter a lot, and we spend a lot of time thinking about that. But it's not that different than what happens today. And I'd say the vast majority of a lot of at least direct to consumer company businesses, media budgets are agentified already. And so whether we like it or not, it's coming. There is no choice. And I'd say to a very strong degree in the big platforms, it's already there.
All right, Vinny, I think that is all we have time for today. So I will just say thank you for joining us here on the Marketers Brief.
Brandon, thanks for having me. Love the work you do over at Ad Age, and great to be talking to you.
That was Vineet Mehra, Chief Growth and Marketing Officer at Chime. I'm Brandon Dorr, Creativity and Media Innovation Reporter at Ad Age. I'd like to thank our producer, Lauren Chiardio, and invite you to subscribe to the Marketers Brief podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. We promise to keep it brief.
Marketers Brief listeners get $40 off an adage.com subscription. Sharpen your marketing edge and visit adage.com/brief for your discount.